The voting screen displayed 17 green lights and 0 red ones. Ambassador Roy Hutchins watched from the human delegation box as the council chamber erupted in applause. 3 years of careful diplomacy had just collapsed in a single unanimous decision. "The motion passes," declared Speaker Quillith Prime, her 4 arms raised in triumph. "All human military vessels must be decommissioned within 6 standard months. Failure to comply will result in immediate expulsion from Council space and complete trade sanctions." Roy remained seated while representatives from 17 different species celebrated around him. The Quillith had sponsored the motion. The Dravine had seconded it. Even a normally neutral Feln had voted yes. They called it necessary containment. They called it civilization. They called it progress. What they really meant was fear. Roy had read the classified reports they thought humans couldn't access. The Council had studied Earth's history with growing horror. 10,000 years of nearly constant warfare. Weapons that could crack planets. Conflicts that consumed entire continents. The galaxy's other species had achieved peace before reaching the stars. Humanity had brought war with them into space. The Quillith delegate approached his box, her expression sympathetic but firm. "Ambassador Hutchins, surely you understand our position. Your people's capacity for organized violence is unprecedented. We cannot allow such dangerous capability to exist unchecked. And if we refuse," Roy asked quietly. The sympathy vanished from her face. "Then humanity will find itself very alone in a very large galaxy. No trade, no travel rights, no treaties. We have been generous in allowing your admission to the Council. Do not mistake that generosity for weakness." Roy stood slowly and gathered his documents. Every eye in the chamber watched him. They expected anger. They expected threats. They expected the human to prove their fears justified. Instead, Roy simply nodded. "I will convey your decision to my government." He walked out of the chamber without another word. Behind him, the celebration continued. They thought they had won. They thought they had tamed the dangerous newcomers. They had no idea what they had just done. The encrypted message Roy sent to Earth contained only 4 words. They've made their choice. 3 days later, humanity issued its official response. No protests, no arguments, no diplomatic maneuvering. Just a simple statement that all registered military vessels would report for decommissioning within the required time frame. The galaxy watched with satisfaction as enormous human warships arrived at designated scrapyards. News feeds broadcast footage of massive destroyers being cut apart, their weapon systems carefully removed and destroyed. Carriers that could hold 100 fighters were reduced to component metals. Battlecruisers capable of cracking moons were dismantled piece by piece. 4 months after the Council's decree, the last official human warship powered down its reactors and surrendered itself for destruction. The galaxy's leaders congratulated themselves on successfully civilizing the aggressive newcomers. Peace and order had prevailed over chaos and violence. Only a few observers noticed the strange patterns emerging in human commercial traffic. Merchant vessels increased 3-fold in number. Mining operations expanded into previously ignored asteroid belts. Survey ships began mapping systems that held no obvious value. Deep space industrial platforms sprouted across frontier regions like metal flowers. Prin was one of those few observers. A junior analyst in Quillith Security, she spent her days reviewing traffic patterns and trade manifests. Her job was boring but essential, catching smugglers and pirates through subtle inconsistencies in shipping data. Lately, the inconsistencies all involved human vessels. A cargo hauler registered as carrying grain would show energy signatures consistent with military-grade power systems. A mining platform would list equipment masses that didn't match its stated payload. Survey ships would appear in systems simultaneously despite claiming to work alone. Prin compiled her findings into a report and submitted it to her supervisor. 2 days later, she was called into his office. "Your report on human shipping anomalies," he said, sliding her datapad across the desk. "I'm afraid this is unacceptable. Sir, the data shows that you're seeing threats where none exist." Humanity complied with the disarmament decree. Their warships are gone. What you're detecting are simply variations in civilian equipment. Different species use different technologies, but the energy signatures are within acceptable parameters for industrial vessels. Analyst Prin, I understand you worked hard on this report. However, I must advise you to focus your talents on actual threats, not conspiracy theories about species who have proven their commitment to peace. Prin took her datapad back and returned to her station. Her supervisor was right, of course. She was being paranoid. Humanity had surrendered its weapons. They were merchants and miners now. Nothing more. But late at night, when the office was empty, Prin would pull up sensor log from human vessels and study them. The numbers didn't lie, even if everyone around her refused to see the truth. Somewhere in the depths of council space, a freight hauler called the Dusty Road finished loading its cargo. Captain and Becker reviewed the manifest with practiced ease. Officially, they were transporting agricultural equipment to a frontier colony. Unofficially, the cargo pods concealed weapon systems powerful enough to level cities, and had served 20 years in Earth's Navy before the disarmament. She'd fought pirates, defended colonies, and earned 3 medals for valor. When the Council demanded humanity surrender its warships, she thought her career was over. Then the recruiters came. They offered her command of a civilian vessel. They showed her the ship's real capabilities hidden beneath its industrial exterior. They asked her a simple question: want to keep protecting people? And accepted immediately. So did 42,000 other former military personnel scattered across the galaxy in ships the Council would never recognize as threats. The Dusty Road powered up its engines and departed for the frontier. Just another unremarkable human vessel going about its peaceful business. No weapons, no threats, nothing to fear. That was exactly what humanity wanted everyone to believe. 6 months had passed since humanity's last warship went silent. The galaxy had moved on. Trade flourished. New treaties were signed. The Council's chambers buzzed with optimism about a future free from the threat of human military aggression. Prin hadn't moved on. She couldn't. The data kept screaming at her, even if nobody else would listen. Human vessels were everywhere now, spreading through the galaxy like seeds on the wind. Every frontier station had at least 3 human ships docked. Every mining region hosted human operations. Every trade route saw human merchants passing through with clockwork regularity. Her latest analysis showed something that made her stomach turn. Every major pirate attack in the past 3 months had occurred in systems with no human presence. Every slaver raid, every smuggler operation, every territorial dispute that turned violent happened in the gaps between human commercial routes that IT couldn't be coincidence. But when she tried to explain the pattern to her colleagues, they just laughed. The humans are good luck, one analyst joked. Maybe we should hire them as mascots. Prin didn't laugh. She was too busy watching the developing situation at Quillith Colony 7 that the colony was small, only 200,000 inhabitants living on a planet that produced valuable medical compounds. Its location at the edge of Council space made it vulnerable. Its value made a target. And today, 17 pirate vessels had just emerged from hyperspace above it. The Broken Claw Syndicate had been terrorizing the frontier for 5 years. Their leader, a Dravine named Scath, commanded the largest pirate fleet anyone had seen in a generation. He broadcast his demands on all frequencies. 10 million credits or the colony burns. The colony's governor sent out desperate distress calls. Council naval forces were 8 days away. Local defense consisted of 3 patrol boats that wouldn't last 5 minutes against Scath's fleet. The people below were on their own. Prin pulled up the system scan, already knowing what she would find. 1 human vessel in system, a freight hauler called the Dusty Road. Registry showed it as an agricultural equipment transport. Crew of 45, no weapons beyond standard meteor defense lasers. She should have looked away. Should have focused on coordinating the Council's response. Should have accepted that 200,000 people were about to die or be enslaved because help was too far away. Instead, she watched the Dusty Road alter its course toward the planet, and Becker sat in her command chair and reviewed the tactical situation. 17 hostiles, various classes, all armed for extended pirate operations. Her own ship, currently disguised as a harmless cargo vessel, would need 90 seconds to transform into combat configuration. Thoughts? She asked her first officer, a former Marine named Patrick Wade. We're outnumbered 17-1. Our weapons are better, but if they swarm us, we'll take damage. Could lose people. And if we don't engage? Patrick looked at the colony scan on his screen. Cities filled with civilians. Schools. Hospitals. Families going about their daily lives with no idea that death orbited above them. Then we're not who we said we'd be. And nodded and opened a channel to her crew. Attention, all hands. We just received a distress call from Quillith Colony 7. 17 pirates are demanding tribute. Council forces are 8 days out. That colony has 200,000 people who need help right now. She paused, letting that sink in. Every person on her crew had volunteered for this. Every one of them understood the mission. But this was different. This would reveal everything. If we engage, the galaxy will know what we are. Our secret ends today. Anyone who wants to object, speak now. Silence answered her. Then Patrick spoke up. Captain, I've got weapon systems standing by. Just say when. And smiled. Fire up the real engines. Drop the cargo pods. Show them what we really are. The transformation took exactly 90 seconds. External hull plates detached and fell away, revealing the armored combat vessel beneath. Cargo pods ejected into space, exposing weapon ports along the ship's flanks. The civilian reactor shut down, and the military-grade fusion core came online, flooding the ship with power that made it visible on every sensor in the system. Prin gasped as her screen lit up with alerts. The human ship was radiating energy signatures that matched Council battlecruisers. Weapon systems were deploying that shouldn't exist on any civilian vessel. The dusty road was shedding its disguise like a predator revealing its true form. Scath saw it too. His fleet detected the energy spike and adjusted their formations, weapons targeting the unexpected threat. Then Anne's voice cut through every communication channel in the system. Broken Claw Syndicate, this is Captain and Becker of the human vessel Dusty Road. You have one chance to leave this system peacefully. Take it. Scatha's laughter echoed across the channel. One ship against 17? The humans have grown arrogant in their civilian roles. Let me show you why real warriors fear the Broken Claw. His fleet opened fire. Dozens of missiles streaked toward the Dusty Road, followed by plasma bolts and railgun rounds. Enough firepower to vaporize a standard merchant vessel 3 times over. The Dusty Road's defensive systems came online with casual efficiency. Point defense lasers swept space, destroying every incoming missile before they covered half the distance. Plasma bolts splashed harmlessly against shields that shouldn't exist on a freight hauler. Railgun rounds were deflected by electromagnetic fields operating at military specifications. Then, and fired back, railguns that had been disguised as cargo cranes spoke with thunder. Missiles erupted from concealed launchers along the ship's spine. Directed energy weapons lit up space with precision that seemed impossible for a single vessel. 3 pirate ships disappeared from sensors in the first volley. Not destroyed, but disabled with surgical strikes that took out engines and weapons while leaving life support intact. And wasn't trying to kill them. She was showing them the difference between pirates and professionals. The remaining 14 ships scattered, trying to create distance. Anne's weapons tracked them with cold efficiency. For more ships went dark as their systems were systematically disabled. The survivors broke formation and ran, their hyperspace drives charging in desperate retreat. And let them go. The point was made. The sensor recordings went viral within hours. Every news network across 17 species broadcast footage of the human freight hauler transforming into a warship. Every analysis program played the battle over and over, counting the seconds it took for one human vessel to defeat a pirate fleet that had terrorized the frontier for years. Prin watched the emergency council session from her station, knowing her career was about to change. Her supervisor had already apologized twice. The department head had requested copies of all her previous reports on human shipping anomalies. Everyone who had dismissed her warnings now wanted to know what else she had discovered. The council chamber looked different today. Gone was the celebratory atmosphere from 6 months ago. Representatives sat in tense silence as Speaker Quillith Prime called the session to order. Ambassador Roy Hutchins stood in the human delegation box, his expression calm and completely unreadable. Ambassador Hutchins, the speaker began, her voice tight with barely controlled anger. You owe this council an explanation. We have evidence of a human vessel engaging in military action. A vessel that was registered as a civilian cargo hauler. A vessel that possessed weapons systems that should not exist after your government's commitment to total disarmament. Roy nodded slowly. I watched the same footage you did. Captain Becker responded to a distress call from one of your colonies. She saved 200,000 Quillith civilians from death or slavery. She accomplished this without causing a single civilian casualty and while showing remarkable restraint toward the hostile forces. I'm unclear on what exactly requires explanation. You violated the disarmament treaty. The Dravine delegate's voice cracked with rage. You promised to decommission all military vessels. We did exactly that. Roy replied, his tone still calm. Every vessel classified as a warship was decommissioned within your time frame. The Dusty Road was never classified as a warship. It's a freight hauler. The fact that it carries defensive systems capable of protecting itself and others is simply prudent business practice in dangerous space. Defensive systems? The Quillith delegate stood, all four arms trembling. That ship disabled 7 pirate vessels in under 3 minutes. Those were not defensive systems. They defended a colony that was under attack, Roy said. I would call that definitively defensive. Speaker Quillith Prime's translator barely kept up with the flood of outraged responses. Roy waited for the noise to die down before continuing. When he spoke again, his voice cut through the chamber like a blade. You asked humanity to dismantle our warships. We complied. You never asked about our merchant fleet. You never inquired about our industrial vessels. You never questioned our mining operations or survey ships. You assumed that by removing what we called warships, you had removed our ability to defend ourselves and others. You pulled up a holographic display showing shipping manifests and registry data. I can now inform this council that humanity currently operates 40,000 vessels throughout council space. All are properly registered as civilian craft. All carry cargo and perform legitimate commercial operations. And yes, all are capable of defensive military action when necessary. The chamber erupted. Accusations flew. Threats were made. Through it all, Roy stood quietly and waited. Finally, when the chaos reached its peak, he raised one hand. Somehow, the gesture commanded silence. You want to know why we did this? Roy asked. Then let me tell you about the Quillith children on Colony 7. There's a girl named Fun who's 8 years old. She likes to draw pictures of the native wildlife. Yesterday, she was playing in her schoolyard when 17 pirate ships appeared in orbit. She was going to die or be sold into slavery. The council fleet was 8 days away. Local defenses were non-existent. He paused, letting that image sink in. Captain Becker was 3 hours away. She could have done nothing, could have continued her route, could have let those 200,000 people suffer and die while waiting for proper authority to arrive. Instead, she revealed the secret humanity has been keeping for 6 months. She showed you what we really are. Roy's expression hardened. You told us we couldn't have warships. Fine. We don't. We have freight haulers that can fight. We have mining ships that carry weapons. We have survey vessels that can defend themselves and anyone nearby. You want to take away our teeth because you feared we would bite. We let you believe you had succeeded, but we never stopped being who we are. The Dravine delegate found his voice again. This is treachery. This is deception on a scale that demands consequences. Then impose them, Roy said simply. Expel humanity from council space. Enact your trade sanctions. Ban our vessels from your systems. But before you do, I want you to answer one question. He gestured to the screen showing Quillith Colony 7. Who saves them next time? Who saves any of the frontier colonies when pirates attack? Who responds when slavers raid? Your forces that take 8 days to arrive? Your patrol boats that can barely handle smugglers? Silence answered him. We've been here 6 months operating in secret, Roy continued. In that time, human vessels have responded to 43 emergency situations. We've rescued over 300,000 beings from pirates, slavers, and raiders. We've done this without asking for payment or recognition. We've done this because it's what we do. He closed the display and looked directly at Speaker Quillith Prime. You wanted to civilize us. You wanted to remove our capacity for violence. But here's what you didn't understand. Humanity's capacity for violence is matched by an equal capacity for protection. We're good at fighting because we've spent 10,000 years learning how. We've also spent 10,000 years learning who to fight for. Pren watched from her station as the council sat in stunned silence. Roy had just admitted to deceiving 17 different species for 6 months. He'd revealed a secret fleet of 40,000 armed vessels. He'd essentially told the most powerful political body in the galaxy that humanity had outmaneuvered them completely, and nobody could argue with a single word he'd said. Not with 200,000 grateful Quillith civilians flooding the networks with messages of thanks. Not with 43 other incidents of human intervention saving lives across the frontier. Not with the cold reality that the Council's own forces had failed to provide the protection its citizens needed. The vote to expel humanity never came. Instead, the Council called a recess to consider its options. As representatives filed out in confused silence, Prin pulled up her analysis of human vessel distribution. Roy had said 40,000 ships. She'd tracked their positions and patterns for months. Now she understood what she was seeing. Humanity hadn't just hidden weapons on civilian vessels. They positioned themselves to respond to any crisis anywhere in Council space within hours. They'd become the galaxy's emergency response force without anyone noticing. And now that the secret was revealed, nobody could afford to make them leave. 3 weeks after the Dusty Road incident, the galaxy had split into 2 camps. Half the Council species wanted humanity expelled immediately, calling them deceivers and threats to galactic peace. The other half pointed to the growing list of lives saved by human intervention and argued that results mattered more than methods. The debate became irrelevant when the pirates started avoiding entire regions of space. Pren had been promoted to senior analyst after her reports on human vessel distribution proved accurate. Her new assignment was tracking the changing patterns of criminal activity across Council space. What she found was remarkable. Pirates who had operated freely for years were suddenly retreating to the farthest edges of known space. Slaver networks that had thrived in frontier regions were collapsing. Smuggling operations were relocating or disbanding entirely. The reason was always the same. There might be a human ship nearby. The phrase had become a deterrent more effective than any council law. Criminal organizations shared information about human vessel locations the way sailors once shared warnings about dangerous reefs. Raiders planned their operations around human shipping routes, carefully avoiding any system where a human ship might respond to a distress call. In her office late at night, Prin compiled the statistics that nobody else wanted to acknowledge. Since humanity revealed their armed civilian fleet, pirate attacks had decreased by 63%. Slaver raids had dropped by 71%. Successful smuggling operations had fallen by 48%. And in every case, the presence of a human vessel in nearby space was the common factor. Her report went to the Council Security Committee, where it was immediately classified. The politicians didn't want to admit that humanity's deception had accomplished more for galactic security than decades of official Council naval operations. Meanwhile, human intervention continued with clockwork efficiency. A mining ship called the Stone Breaker responded to a hostage situation on a Feln research station, disabling the hostage takers without harming a single captive. A medical transport named the Mercy Run intercepted 6 slaver vessels and freed 200 beings who had already been sold to buyers in illegal markets. A geological survey ship stopped a territorial dispute from becoming a shooting war by simply positioning itself between the 2 fleets and announcing its presence. Young beings across 17 species started asking questions their elders couldn't answer. If humans could respond so quickly, why couldn't their own militaries? If human civilians could carry weapons for self-defense, why were council citizens required to be defenseless? If humanity had learned to fight through 10,000 years of warfare, what had the council learned from 10,000 years of enforced peace? The questions made politicians uncomfortable, but they made military commanders furious. How could civilian humans be more effective than professional soldiers? How could merchant ships defeat pirate fleets that council warships struggled against? The answers suggested things about council military capability that nobody wanted to discuss publicly. Roy Hutchins received death threats daily. Some came from pirates and slavers whose operations had been destroyed. Others came from council citizens who still believed humanity was a threat. A few came from council military officers who saw human success as a personal insult. Roy ignored them all and continued his work. Today, that work meant meeting privately with Pren in a quiet restaurant far from the council chambers. She arrived early, her security training making her check exits and sight lines before sitting down. When Roy joined her, he ordered tea and waited for her to speak first. "You knew," she said without preamble. "You knew exactly how the council would react." "We had theories," Roy admitted. "We understood that fear often makes people predictable. You wanted them to outlaw your warships." Roy smiled slightly. "We wanted them to feel safe. Your people saw our military vessels and felt threatened. Every proposal we made, every treaty we offered, came with the shadow of our warships behind it. We couldn't build trust while those shadows remained. So you dismantled your entire military fleet." "We dismantled every vessel classified as a warship," Roy corrected. "There's a difference. An important difference that the council failed to consider in their rush to feel secure." Pren leaned forward. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you're the only analyst who saw the truth before it was revealed. You tracked our vessel distributions. You noticed the patterns in criminal activity. You tried to warn your superiors, and they dismissed you. I want you to know that your instincts were correct." "That's not an answer." Roy's expression grew serious. "The galaxy is about to face something worse than pirates and slavers. The council doesn't know it yet, but we've been detecting signals from beyond charted space. A new species is coming. They've been watching, studying, learning your weaknesses. And when they arrive, they won't be interested in trade or diplomacy." Pren felt her blood turn cold. "How do you know this?" "Because it's what we would do. Scout first, observe, find the weak points, then strike. Humanity learned that lesson thousands of years ago." Roy met her eyes. "The council is going to need help. Real help, not political debates about treaty compliance. And when that happens, I need someone inside council security who understands what we really are." "Were you really?" "The galaxy's last line of defense. Not because we want to be, not because we're better than anyone else, but because we've had 10,000 years to learn how to fight, and we've also learned when fighting is necessary." Roy stood up. "The council outlawed our warships because they feared our capacity for violence. They should have been grateful for our capacity for restraint." He left credits for the tea and walked out. Pren sat alone, staring at her datapad. She pulled up the deep space sensor logs Roy had mentioned, files she shouldn't have access to. But somehow, they were now available to her security clearance. The signals were there. Faint but unmistakable. Ships moving through uncharted regions. Energy signatures that didn't match any known species. Formation patterns that suggested military organization. And they were getting closer. Pren ran the calculations 3 times. At their current speed, the unknown fleet would reach council space in 6 months. Maybe less. And when they arrived, they would find a galaxy that had just spent half a year debating whether the humans who saved lives were heroes or deceivers. She thought about Roy's words. About humanity's capacity for violence matched by restraint. About 10,000 years of learning when a fight. And she thought about 40,000 human vessels scattered across the galaxy, pretending to be merchants and miners while watching the stars for threats. The council had outlawed human warships. Humanity had answered with silence and hidden weapons. Now Pren understood the deeper truth. That silence wasn't deception. It was mercy. Humanity could have refused the disarmament demand, could have fought to keep their obvious military vessels, could have forced the issue and proved they were the threat everyone feared. Instead, they had hidden their teeth and waited. They had saved lives without asking for recognition. They had protected a galaxy that feared them while asking nothing in return. And when the real threat arrived, they would be ready. The question was whether the Council would accept help from the species they had tried to disarm. The first colony fell on a Tuesday. Feln Colony 12, a research outpost studying exotic particles, stopped transmitting without warning. 3 hours later, automated distress buoys reported total loss of communication. Council patrol ships arrived to find the settlement burning and the entire population of 40,000 gone and demands. No communication, just complete destruction and empty cities. The second colony fell 2 days later, then a third. By the end of the week, 6 Council worlds had been hit by an enemy nobody had seen coming. The Resh had emerged from uncharted space with overwhelming force, technology beyond Council understanding, and tactics that suggested they had been studying the galaxy for years. Prin had tried to warn them. She had forwarded Roy's intelligence to the Security Committee. They had dismissed it as human fear-mongering, another attempt to justify their hidden weapons. Now 60,000 Council military personnel were dead, and 3 more colonies were under siege. The Council emergency session looked nothing like the chamber where they had once celebrated humanity's disarmament. Representatives shouted over each other. Accusations flew between species. The Dravine blamed the Quillith for weakening galactic security. The Quillith blamed the Feln for ignoring intelligence warnings. Everyone blamed humanity for not warning them sooner, despite the classified reports that had been ignored for months. Roy stood in the human delegation box and waited for the chaos to exhaust itself. He had learned patience in 10,000 years of human history. The Council would eventually realize they needed help. The question was how many more would die before pride gave way to survival. Speaker Quillith Prime finally restored order by threatening to adjourn the session permanently. In the silence that followed, she looked directly at Roy. Ambassador Hutchins, humanity has vessels throughout Council space. Vessels we now know are armed and capable. Will you commit them to the defense of Council worlds? No, Roy said simply. The chamber erupted again. Threats and accusations filled the air. How dare humanity refuse to help? How dare they stand by while innocents died? The hypocrisy was stunning. These are the same representatives who had demanded humanity disarm. The same ones who had called human military capability a threat to galactic peace. Roy waited again. This time, Speaker Quillith Prime didn't restore order. She simply waited with him, her 4 arms folded, her expression unreadable. She understood what he was doing. When the noise finally died down on its own, Roy continued, I will not commit human vessels to fight under Council command. Your military doctrine is 50 years behind ours. Your tactics assume honorable warfare between equivalent opponents. Your command structure prioritizes political considerations over military effectiveness. If human ships fight under your orders, we will lose. And worse, we will fail to protect the people who need us. Then what do you propose? The Quillith delegate's voice was cold. Stand down. Evacuate your forces from contested space. Let's handle this. The suggestion was met with outrage, as Roy knew it would be. Council admirals declared they would never surrender command to civilian humans. Politicians insisted that Council sovereignty must be maintained. Military pride demanded that Council forces lead the defense of Council space. While they argued, another colony fell. Then 2 more. The Resh were moving faster than anyone expected, their fleet coordination suggesting a level of military sophistication the Council hadn't seen in centuries. Every engagement ended the same way. Council ships tried to fight with honor and tactics. Resh ships destroyed them with brutal efficiency and moved on. Prin watched the casualty reports climb. 70,000 dead. 80,000. The number kept rising while politicians debated command structure and jurisdiction. She thought about Roy's words regarding Council military doctrine being 50 years behind. She pulled up battle recordings from human interventions against pirates. Short engagements, overwhelming force, surgical precision. No honor, no fair fights. Just effective violence applied exactly where needed. Then she looked at Council battle recordings against the Resh. Long engagements, traditional formations, mutual respect between commanders. The Council fought wars like chess games. Humanity fought wars like they meant it. The emergency session was entering its third day when a new message interrupted the proceedings. A Resh transmission broadcast on all frequencies, demanding the Council's unconditional surrender. The alternative was systematic destruction of every populated world until compliance was achieved. The chamber fell silent. No more arguments about command structure. No more debates about sovereignty. Just the cold reality that the Resh were going to win unless something changed. Roy spoke into that silence. I need full authority. No council oversight. No political interference. No demands for honorable combat or tactical approval. Human forces operate independently with one mission: stop the Resh. Give me that, and I'll save what's left of your civilization. And if we refuse, asked the Dravine delegate, then you'll lose. Not quickly. Not cleanly. You'll watch your colonies fall one by one while your fleets die, trying to fight with honor against an enemy that has none. You'll see your military traditions preserved right up until the moment the Resh finish studying you and move on to simple extermination. Speaker Quillith Prime looked around the chamber. She saw representatives who had once celebrated human disarmament, now faced with the consequences of weakening galactic defense. She saw military officers who had scorned human tactics, now watching their fleets burn. She saw a choice between pride and survival. The Council grants Ambassador Hutchins full authority over defensive operations. All human vessels are authorized to engage hostile forces without restriction. Council forces will evacuate contested space as requested. She paused. Don't make us regret trusting you. Roy nodded once. Then he sent a single encrypted message to every human vessel in the galaxy. The message contained 3 words: drop the masks. Across Council space, 40,000 human ships stopped pretending. Cargo haulers became battlecruisers. Mining vessels deployed carrier wings. Survey ships revealed weapon systems that made Council observers gasp. Every human vessel had been holding back, maintaining the fiction of civilian operations while capable of so much more. Fleet Admiral Natasha Sokolov, commander of humanity's actual military forces, had spent 6 months disguised as a freight company executive. Now she stood in the command center of the Dusty Road, which served as the flagship for the largest military operation humanity had conducted since reaching the stars. She reviewed deployment orders for 40,000 vessels, coordinated attack patterns that had been planned months in advance, and thought about Roy's final message to her. Show them what we chose not to do. The Resh had studied the Council and found weakness. They had observed traditional warfare and learned to exploit it. They had watched honor-bound fleets and identified every tactical mistake. What they hadn't studied was humanity. They didn't know about the species that learned warfare through 10,000 years of trial and blood. They didn't know about the military force that had hidden itself as civilians specifically to avoid scaring allies. They were about to learn. And the lesson would be brutal. The Resh had expected victory. They had studied Council species for 3 years, mapped their territories, analyzed their tactics, and identified every weakness. Their invasion fleet of 800 vessels represented overwhelming force against enemies who fought with predictable honor. The conquest of Council space should have been complete within months. They accomplished it in 6 weeks. Then everything changed. Admiral Natasha Sokolov didn't believe in fair fights. She believed in winning. Her strategy was simple: hit the Resh everywhere at once with force they couldn't predict and tactics they couldn't counter. No honorable engagements. No traditional battle lines. Just 3,000 human ships coordinating across 17 systems simultaneously. The first strike came against a Resh occupation force at Feln Colony 4. The colony had fallen 2 weeks earlier. its population enslaved and forced to work processing facilities for Resh use. 12 Resh warships orbited the planet, confident in their superiority and certain no council force could challenge them. They detected the human ships too late. 50 vessels emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, already firing. The Resh tried to respond with the tactics that had worked against council fleets. They failed to understand that humans didn't fight the same way. Within 8 minutes, all 12 Resh ships were disabled. Not destroyed, but systematically taken apart with precision strikes that left crews alive and trapped. Natasha broadcast a message on all Resh frequencies in their own language. You came to our galaxy thinking we were weak. You studied the wrong species. We are humanity, and we're taking back what you stole. Similar attacks happened across 17 systems within the same hour. Resh forces that had been celebrating easy conquests suddenly faced enemies who fought like nothing they had encountered. Human ships used guerrilla tactics in space, hitting weak points and vanishing before Resh reinforcements could respond. They turned Resh technology against them, hacking their communication networks and feeding false information. They targeted supply lines, leaving Resh fleets stranded without resources. Most devastating of all, they attacked the enemy's confidence. Every Resh commander had been trained to believe their technology made them invincible. Human forces systematically proved that belief wrong. They disabled superior vessels with inferior weapons through superior tactics. They outmaneuvered larger fleets through coordination that seemed impossible. They demonstrated that technology meant nothing against opponents who actually knew how to fight. Prin watched the battle reports from her station, barely believing what she was seeing. Human casualties, minimal. Resh casualties, catastrophic. In 48 hours, humanity had accomplished what Council forces couldn't manage in 6 weeks. They had stopped the Resh advance and begun pushing them back. The key was that humans didn't play by rules the Resh understood. Council fleets engaged in direct combat, ship against ship, tactics against tactics. Human fleets fought like water flowing around obstacles. They appeared where unexpected, struck where unprepared, and vanished before retaliation. They used psychological warfare, making the Resh fear every shadow in space. They turned the invasion force's own strengths into weaknesses through tactics refined over 10,000 years of human warfare. 3 weeks after the human intervention began, Natasha tracked the Resh back to their home system. She brought 3,000 ships to their doorstep, not to conquer, but to make a point. The Resh homeworld had orbital defenses that should have destroyed any attacking fleet. Human forces disabled them in 20 minutes without firing a single shot at the planet below. Natasha's broadcast to the Resh leadership was simple. You came to our galaxy. You attacked those under our protection. You enslaved peaceful beings and thought yourselves superior. We could destroy your world. We could do to you what you did to others. Instead, we offer terms. Return every captive. Pay reparations for the damage caused. Withdraw from council space forever and never return. Refuse, and we show you what humanity looks like when we stop being merciful. The Resh had never encountered an enemy that offered terms after achieving total victory. Their culture was built on domination through strength. Mercy was weakness, but they looked at their disabled defenses, their shattered fleet, and the human ships that could annihilate their homeworld with minimal effort. They agreed to every term. Within 2 weeks, every enslaved being was returned home. Within a month, reparations began flowing to devastated colonies. The Resh withdrew to their own space, their legend of invincibility destroyed by a species that fought without honor or mercy, yet somehow showed both when it mattered. The council reconvened in chambers that felt smaller than before. Representatives who had once celebrated human disarmament now sat in silence as casualty reports were compiled. Council forces, 60,000 dead before human intervention. Human forces, 800 casualties during the entire campaign. Colonies saved, 17. Beings freed or rescued, 200,000. The Quillith delegate stood first. Her voice was quiet but steady. We owe humanity an apology and our lives. We demanded you disarm because we feared your capacity for violence. We should have feared our own capacity for weakness. Roy stood in the human delegation box, looking older than he had 6 months ago. You did what you thought was right. You tried to build a galaxy without war. That's admirable. But peace without the ability to defend, it is just waiting to be conquered. You needed to learn that lesson. We just wish it hadn't cost so many lives. What happens now? Speaker Quillith Prime asked. You have proven humanity's military superiority beyond question. You could demand anything from this council. We demand nothing, Roy said. We propose a new treaty, one that recognizes every species' right to self-defense and defense of others. One that establishes mutual protection rather than mutual disarmament. One that acknowledges that peace is maintained not by hiding from violence, but by being prepared to meet it. The treaty negotiations took 3 months. The result was unprecedented in council history. A mutual defense pact with humanity as guarantors of peace, not through conquest or subjugation, but through the promise that any attack on one species would be answered by all. The phrase that emerged from the negotiations became galactic law. Touch one of us, answer to all of us. 6 months after the Resh were defeated, Prin visited Roy one final time. She had been promoted to Director of Council Security, a position that required working closely with human forces. She found him in his office, reviewing reports on human vessel deployments. You knew all of this would happen, she said. You planned for the Council to outlaw your warships. We hoped, Roy corrected. We understood that fear makes people predictable. The Council saw our military vessels and felt threatened. They needed those threats removed before they could see us as protectors instead of conquerors. So you let them disarm you. We let them believe they had disarmed us. There's a difference. Roy smiled slightly. The Council's law didn't disarm humanity. It freed us, no longer constrained by diplomatic concerns about military vessels. No longer seen as threats first and allies second. When that colony called for help, Captain Becker could respond without worrying about political implications. Because she was just a civilian freight captain. Exactly. And now, when people see a human ship, they don't see a warship. They see a guardian. Roy closed his reports. We answered the Council's decree with silence. We let that silence speak of what we could have done and chose not to do. That restraint earned more trust than any treaty could have. Pren understood finally. Humanity hadn't lost anything when they dismantled their warships. They had gained everything. They had become the galaxy's protectors, not through force, but through choice. Through hiding their teeth until teeth were needed. Through showing mercy when they could have shown dominance. Through proving that the most powerful weapon wasn't the one you used, but the one everyone knew you had and trusted you wouldn't use except when absolutely necessary. 40,000 human ships spread across the galaxy, silent guardians watching over species that once feared them. The Council had outlawed human warships. Humanity had answered with silence and dread. And in that silence, they had built something stronger than any fleet. They had built trust.